Be a gifted storyteller. We also celebrate with her the finish line on this milestone. Congratulations to her. It is a folktale speech. She's not to act it out, but is to tell it. The title is The Empty Pot, and it is a Chinese folktale. Would you welcome Missy Carlson?
By royal proclamation, the Emperor of China was announcing a contest to determine who would be the next heir to the throne. You see, the Emperor had grown very old and he had no son to take his place. And as a plant-loving emperor, he announced a plant-growing contest. Any boy that fancied himself to be the next emperor would be given just one royal seed to plant. The boy was to take that seed home, put it in a pot, and then return 6 months later to show the emperor the result. Whoever had the largest and most beautiful plant would become the next emperor of China. You can imagine the excitement in the villages. All the boys that fancied themselves to be the next emperor were beyond excited. And the parents, of course the parents were getting involved too, and they were just envisioning themselves living in the palace and how that would be. When the day came to get the seed, all of the boys surrounded the palace from all the different villages, and they were given just one precious possibility or promise. And they put it in their palm, and they took it home. This is how it was for Jun in his village. Jun was known as the best gardener in the entire village. All the other villagers loved his bok choy, his melons, and his snow peas. And you would frequently find Jun in his garden, pulling up the weeds, moving one little sapling over to be in the sun, transplanting another one into the shade. So as Jun walked home with his little precious possibility, he held it tightly so that he would not lose it, but not so tightly that he would crush it. When he got home, he got the best pot he had. He polished it up. He put large rocks in the bottom of it, and then he covered it with smaller pebbles, and then he went out to his garden and got the best, most precious, blackest dirt he could find to fill up that pot. He took his seed, he put it down 1 inch into that pot, covered it up, and watered it. And he waited, and he watched, and he watered. But nothing was happening. This was going on throughout the village. All the boys were watching their pots, just waiting for that little seedling to burst through the soil. Jun, in Jun's village, was the first to have that little sprout pop up. And Jun just knew that he was going to be the next emperor, and he was practicing his royal skills by bossing around the other children that were adoring him at that moment. There was much congratulations and excitement for Jun, because he was going to be the winner, he knew. Next was Manchu. His seedling burst through the pot. Then it was Wang. Wang's seedling came through the dirt. But nothing for Jun. Jun just didn't know what was wrong. He couldn't understand why his seedling was not coming up. He was the best gardener. He was better than those other boys. It wasn't working. So Jun did what he thought was best, and he transplanted it to another pot. He went back out to his garden and got the freshest, moistest, blackest dirt, filled up another pot, and waited. He watered it and waited and watched. But nothing happened. All the other boys, their plants were growing into these big stalks, massive plants. But still nothing for Jun. And Jun was becoming despondent over this. He didn't know what else to do. The other boys would start to mock him and say, "That pot is as empty as Jun's pot," when their rice bowl was empty, or they had no treats in their pockets. Jun, in one last act of desperation, decided to transplant it once again, and he moved his little seed to another pot. And this time, he put in it dried fish, to help nourish it as fertilizer. And he broke up the dirt balls and made them into fine powder so the seed would have the best chance to grow. 6 months arrived much too quickly for Jun. And all of the other boys were getting excited, and they polished up their pots and they glistened the leaves, and they were putting on their finest attire to go back to the palace to show the emperor their results. They were walking down the road on the path to the palace, and the parents were with them, and some of the parents even had to hold up the stalks of the other plants. But Jun, he was still in despair. His plant still had not grown. He wailed, "What will I do? I did my best, and nothing happened." His father said, "Jun, you did your best, it's okay." And his mother said, "Jun, just take your empty pot to the emperor and show him you did your best." So Jun got ready, and he got on his finest attire, and he joined the other boys with their big plants and his empty pot as they were walking to the palace. When they were at the palace, all of the boys were lined up in a row, waiting for the emperor. Finally, the emperor comes out in his finest attire as well, and one by one, he looks at each plant and looks at each boy. And he has a scowl on his face, and he's looking at him and going, "Hmm." And the scowl gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And finally, he comes to Jun in his empty pot, and he says, "You bring me an empty pot?" And Jun lowers his head and he says, "Sir, I am so sorry. I worked my best with this seed and nothing happened at all. I am so sorry that nothing grew. I don't know what to do. I transplanted it and gave it the most love that I had." The emperor looked at the pot again and he goes, And then he turns and looks at all the other boys and he says, "I have no idea how those other boys got anything to grow at all because the seeds that I handed out were all cooked." He looked at June and he smiled and he said, "You will be the next emperor of China."